Hi, and welcome to Freedom Fighters Code Gray. This is a show where we discuss human trafficking, an issue that's happening in our own backyard. Some viewers may find the content of the show triggering as we're discussing exploitation and trauma. If you need information and support related to human trafficking, you can call the Canadian Human Trafficking Hotline 24/7 at 1-833-900-1010. According to the Canadian Women's Foundation, 51% of girls who have been trafficked have been involved in the child welfare system. It's also been identified that children in the child welfare system are at higher risk of being trafficked. Today, I'm joined by Samantha Orr, the Anti-Human Trafficking Coordinator at Family Connexions, who's going to be discussing this topic. Welcome, Samantha. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So just to start off with, some of our viewers tuning in and listening to this conversation may never have heard about child sex trafficking. Could you take some time to explain for folks who are listening today about what exactly this is?
Okay, so we're going to focus just on what child sex trafficking is. Like, we could go into the whole exploitation piece, but for today, we're just focusing on that. So it is a form of sexual exploitation. So sex trafficking refers to forced, coercive, fraudulent, or deceptive exchange for sex for something of value. For example, things like money, food, alcohol, drugs, transportation, shelter, just to name a few. And it's just important to recognize too that children and youth under the age of 18 cannot engage in sex work or in exchange for sex for money, drugs, alcohol, shelter, transportation, or food, or any other object of necessity. So note too, it was happening before, but then even during COVID, it heightened more so on the social media platforms. So this is very prevalent through our social media platforms as well.
Thank you for taking time to explain that. And I think when you were highlighting that it's happening through social media, that's so important because so many of our youth and children today are on these devices, right? And so someone can be really exploited in their own home without necessarily having to leave and be moved into different places. And we know that there's a number of different people who are experiencing exploitation. Who would you say is at higher risk for being trafficked in our community specifically?
Okay, so really, anyone can be a victim of this crime. We know, however, working within the child welfare system, that it makes the children we serve at higher risk. We know that victims of sex trafficking are overrepresented in the child welfare system and can become involved in sex trafficking prior to our involvement, during our involvement, or after our involvement. So we do know that stats-wise, but I also want to draw attention to that marginalized and racialized women and girls experience added layers of discrimination and barriers to support, as well as with the colonialization and systemic racism. It has created intergenerationally marginalized communities that are targeted by these exploiters. Indigenous and Black and other racialized women and girls often lack the social supports, leaving room for exploitation. So I do want to note that I'm saying girls here, but I also want to be mindful males can be impacted too, but our stats show that women and girls are very highly overrepresented when it comes to being trafficked.
Now, Samantha, you work for Family Connexions. Could you take some time to explain, like, what is Family Connection? What do you do, and who are the people that you are supporting in the community?
Okay, so we are Simcoe Muskoka Family Connexions. So it is a nonprofit multi-service agency operating out of the district of Muskoka and Simcoe County. So we operate as child welfare services in these two communities, but also just being mindful too that we are the mental health lead within the Muskoka jurisdiction. So they have the children's mental health associated with them up in Muskoka. We are one of two organizations legally mandated to protect children from abuse and neglect, but I also want to be mindful too that we have DNOG, which is our Indigenous organization that also provides child welfare service to our Indigenous communities.
Now, you have a dedicated team now, from my understanding, that purpose is to solely focus on human trafficking, prevention, and support. Why is that? When did this group kind of start? And why did Family Connections think that was something that was important to do?
So some background in regards to that. So currently in the province, there's 2 care teams set up. So one is ran through Toronto CAS and Durham CAS in conjunction with the Indigenous organization NOG. They also have a care team. So that was piloted through the ministry out of a model based out of Alberta. So that started up. So the hope is eventually to have the care teams from the ministry level rolled out across all the children's aid societies across the province. So they, in the future, so because we know working with this population, it is a specialized skill and there's a lot of collaboration that needs to go along with that. But our agency just being in the forefront of this, and we started our endeavor probably, I want to say now, focusing on this work probably over 8 years ago, but we formalized it to try to mirror the care teams. So if and when it does come to our organization, we're already ready and set to go. We do know that through training and better understanding, there is specific skill base required in order to do these investigations. So they are not typical child welfare investigations, and we need to approach them very differently. These investigations are very tough as there's so many layers involved in them, and trust and relationship is key in part of that work, right? So survivors, youth, and our risk youth or parents really need to have an understanding and a trust in us in hopes to help them exit if they are entrenched, or if they're at risk, hopefully we can mitigate those risks. So we know that working collaboratively with our community partners that have special skill base when it comes to trafficking and working with survivors and at-risk youth or victims is a very effective approach. So having specially trained workers in our organization and the collaborative connection to our community services really does go a long way.
Thanks, Samantha. Now, I imagine some people who are listening and tuning in are utterly shocked that there is the trafficking and exploitation of children in our community. And so I'm wondering if you could share what you think is needed in order to prevent exploitation from happening in the first place in our community. Like, what can we do to stop this?
Okay, so for people to be more aware and educated and have open discussions is essential to combating this crime. The more our youth and parents know about the warning signs and what it involves, helps prevent future victimization. It even helps peer on peer. So if a youth recognizes even the signs and indicators within that youth, they can maybe go to that youth directly and say, I feel like you're kind of in some trouble, or go to the parent and see what help can be offered. There's some great grassroots organizations out there that are already doing a lot of the educational component in this work and providing that education to both youth and families within the communities. I just want to mirror too, about a year ago, the hotline did come out with their first report from their research that they had been gathering. And part of that in there was showing that education was key in the prevention of this crime. I just wanted to, as I talk about warning signs, I just want to be mindful that our audience may not know what I'm talking about. So if I could just speak to maybe a few of those, but not limited, because there are many. But these are key pieces that we see on a regular basis. So that's like a change in peer groups, hanging out with older females, males, a drastic change in appearance, and that could be either very provocative or very a lack of hygiene, a lack of care about themselves. Okay, so we can see it either way. Unexplained expensive items coming home. Often we see vape pods, but the youth don't have jobs, money is not being given to them by their family. And brand name items that they wouldn't necessarily be able to afford. Multiple phones, very secretive about their peers, not telling names, last names, locations, and also two, very secretive about social media posts. Increase absence from school, running away, and two, if they are more entrenched, we may then start to see tags like branding of tattoos and such on their body.
Thank you, Samantha, for taking the time to highlight those warning signs for our viewers. I think this is information that everyone needs to be aware of, to know, like you said, whether it's parents who are able to share that information and look out for children and youth in their care, or for peer-to-peer, for youth to be aware of these signs, to recognize it in the community. What are some of the current intervention tactics or models of care for youth who are being trafficked, particularly in foster care? What does care and support look like for that population group?
So our hope, and as we build capacity within our organization, so education within our foster community is regarding sex trafficking is helpful, as well as running youth nights where they're getting educated. We haven't so much done so during COVID, but our hope is to continue to then resurrect that and start to roll those trainings out as well, and informed sessions. And obviously, our aim is to keep kids out of foster care altogether, because we know ultimately they are best suited within their own home environment. So it's just helping the children remain at home where they're best. If they do have to come into foster care, it's just the education piece. And if there's warning signs, and our team is available to assist and support those homes, as well as we would look to our community partners as well to help and assist. So there is group homes specific to working with sex trafficking victims, but it's very limited. And we also know that we do have limited resources. So, I mean, everyone's time is cut thin, but, we try to make it work.
Well, thank you so much, Samantha, for sharing your insights and expertise on this topic. We will continue this conversation after a short break. Hi, and welcome back to Freedom Fighters Code Gray, a show where we're discussing human trafficking, an issue that's happening in our own backyard. Today, I'm joined by Samantha Orr, who is the Anti-Human Trafficking Coordinator at Family Connections. Thanks for being here, Samantha. And as we pick up this discussion, I was wondering if you could give an overview of what Family Connection is and your role and the population group that you are serving as the Anti-Human Trafficking Coordinator.
My role within the agency is to work primarily with youth that may be at risk. And that's not limited to just youth. That can be also parents who have been at risk for trafficking or sex trafficking, or are involved or exiting. So in that role, I've done a lot of work within the organization, trainings, and building a team of expertise in order to combat sex trafficking. So that's my primary role at this time. There's some other initiatives that I'll get into in a little bit, but that's primarily our role. And Family Connections, just so that we're clear, is the child welfare organization for Simcoe Muskoka, who deals with abuse and neglect for children that we serve within our community.
And you mentioned, there are initiatives that are underway. Can you share a little bit more about those and what exactly you and your team are working on as it relates to anti-human trafficking prevention and support?
So I can share some more. So I can speak to, I'm here, I can speak to community tables in which that the society is involved with. So locally, we have a table called Project Safe Horizons that does meet on a regular basis, that works within the Barrie community. And we educate ourselves about certain agencies and what their initiatives is, what they can do, how they can help out. So that's one. We also have a table up in the Muskoka region as well that typically does somewhat of the same thing. We also, on a provincial table, on a bigger scale with all the Ontario Children's Aid Society, we do have a provincial working group. So we do meet on a regular basis. And again, same thing, education, good discussion, case share, and anything that is important to bring up. We are also to the identified people within the province that are the go-to people around anti-human trafficking or human trafficking expertise. So that's kind of some of the initiatives that are happening across the province and on a local level. And also too, I can speak about a pilot project that we are working on. So a few years back, we wrote a grant in conjunction with York CAS and York University and ourselves, and we were successful in that. So we did identify that within the child welfare system, we have an overrepresentation. So we need a screening tool, essentially, to flag our high-risk youth. So that's been researched and exhausted at this point. So I'm very excited to say that within the next few weeks, we'll be doing our first test pilot on this risk tool. And if successful, then it will be able to be used globally across the child welfare sector. And our hopes is that it also can work with those too that are just working with vulnerable youth. So that may be the school systems and such. So stay tuned. There will be more to come on that, but that's one huge initiative that is happening right now with our agency in York CAS.
Congratulations. That is so exciting. And I can see how that will be such a valuable tool locally, but also, as you mentioned, across the country and globally as well. That's really fantastic. You've mentioned being a part of these roundtables in our community, provincially, and now you're talking about partnering with universities. So many different forms of collaboration. Why do you think that this kind of collaboration with different stakeholders and service providers is so essential in order to really tackle this crime and the issue of human trafficking in our community?
Okay, so in doing this work, we know that community partners are essential to this work and can assist from many different perspectives in addressing this crime. So when we're working with a youth that are at risk or entrenched, we often pull for our own agency, myself, in how I do my work, is we do pull from all these different organizations within the community. And I like to call it the hug approach, that we are wrapping all the good supportive agencies and support services around the table and around the family or the youth to help and support, right? And know that they're not at fault. This is not something they could have prevented. It is just what it is. And we're here to help and support from a very non-judgmental perspective. So in that, each community partner brings a different lens and a skill base, which is essential for supporting the youth. The more we work together, the better understanding we have, and we know who these recruiters potentially are, because, you know, names are brought up or street names are brought up, and we are aware of who these people may be, which helps us in the future to know this is bad news, to stay away, right? So we start identifying those as I speak about, and each community partner that is involved can bring a piece to this that is different. So our hope too is not to necessarily have CAS involved or child welfare system involved long term, because I think really the key piece is having these community partners support these families on a longer term basis without having us involved all the time, which we know is probably better for the family and youth that we serve.
That's great. What, Samantha, do you want the community to know about the issue of human trafficking, what it looks like, how it happens in the Simcoe Muskoka region? What do you think is important for viewers to know?
So I want you to know that it's very prevalent and active within our community. That's when I think naive piece that people don't really think about. They think it's international, it's in the movies, it's this, it's that. It doesn't happen here, it won't happen to us, but it very much does. And as innocent as you think it is, and your children are as protected as they are, nobody is not untouched from this potential crime. So I just think that it's very important to note that Barrie or Simcoe County is very much part of what they call the corridor. And if you want more information on that, that can be found on the hotline. It's a very fulsome website. So the corridor is considered running from Ottawa to Windsor and then up the 400. And if we look at that and how this crime works, it's based out of hotels, right? So if we look at every major exit along the Barrie, for example, what do we have? We have hotels at every major exit. So it's a very easy crime to drive, and it's fast, it's in and it's gone, right? So that's why I want people to be aware that we are very much part of the corridor, and it is very much happening within our community. So again, as I said, the warning signs before, it's just really essential that we talk to our kids, we have these open discussions, nothing's off topic, and we really need to just educate our kids. And there's some great platforms out there through Fight for Freedom, the Government of Ontario, Toronto Police Services have a great website. It just even short videos that can bring about these conversations with our youth and our kids, right? And parents to educate ourselves.
Now, you are involved in this as your full-time job. You are kind of in the area of fighting human trafficking in the work that you do each day. What are some of the things that you have learned personally since getting involved and undertaking this type of work?
Yeah. So like I said, like we think that it wouldn't affect our communities, or that only happens in the big cities and things like that. So what I've learned is very much that it is an issue within our community. And there's a lot of change that has come. And I think that knowing is part of the battle. So that's what I've learned, and bringing it and knowing that it's in our community is a huge piece, but taking on bigger systems and breaking them down is also something that I've learned that still creates these barriers of these barriers that can, where am I going with this? Barriers that may be loopholes for this crime to continue. So we can also eliminate the inequities that the child welfare system puts in place for our youth that make them at high risk. So it's really taking on and learning and all those pieces and the systemic pieces and the marginalization, and really those are the pieces. And how can we help? How can we serve? How can we break those barriers down? So I think that that's one thing that I've learned. The big challenge is to take on the bigger systems. Like I said, they're very much designed for the dominant culture, and we need to change this. There's gaps in many of our systems that help sustain this crime. And for example, like our legal system, like you have to identify, and these victims have to come forward in order to have these guys charged, or these perpetrators charged. Well, that's not as simple when you've been, so coerced to be so scared. So those are some of the bigger system issues that I have seen. The other piece is just around just being aware of what's being done within our own community, and just really, it's not an international crime. It's very much in our communities, and it's here. So it's just really, that's one of the biggest things I've learned, is just that even now, even having this conversation with people that I meet, conversations are starting to happen, which are really great, but there's still a lot of naivety around this, and a reluctance to see that it's actually happening in our community. So it's not like you see on TV. It's here, and they're very good at what they do. So I do see a lack of services. That's something else that I've learned. So there's a lot more, I think, that could be done, some more money and funding that could be put into grassroots organizations that would really be helpful in serving our high-risk youth. And yeah. And I know the initiatives coming within the school systems around the education around this, but I'm not sure on what level they are at this time.
Well, that was a really helpful reflection, Samantha, on just both the systemic and social barriers that are contributing to this crime, but also like on the practical level, the importance of people just really facing this issue head on to realize that this is happening here, to educate themselves and learn what they can do. So on that note, where can people in the community access more information as it relates to this issue? But also maybe there's someone tuning in who is aware of someone who's being exploited. Where can they reach out for support?
So I've echoed it throughout the talk today, but I just want to again highlight it. The hotline, the Anti-Human Trafficking Canadian hotline, is such a good, fulsome website that if you even type in there, say Barrie, Ontario, it will pull up all the supportive services that will help with somebody who is involved in sex trafficking. They have great articles on there. They also are a support. So if you have a child or a loved one that is involved in the sexual exploitation, you can call the hotline for support and just have that conversation. But two, there's also a lot of our grassroots, like the Women's Shelter, Busby, we have a lot, Bridge North, Fight for Freedom. There's so many, our Child Advocacy Center. There's so many good support systems that are out there, and they're listed within the hotline if they've registered their organization with the hotline. But I also too want to just mirror, if there's something today that you guys wanted more information on and you don't feel comfortable reaching out anywhere, you can go to Family Connections, our webpage, and there is a page there for the human trafficking. And there is an email that can go directly to me about inquiries, but also know too, if we do know a youth that is at risk or is involved, then absolutely call into our agency and we can do and see what we can try and do what we can to support that youth and that family.
Well, thank you so much, Samantha, for taking the time to join me on the show today, and really for the collaborative work that you and your team are undertaking each and every single day to help prevent exploitation from happening in the foster care system, but also to support those who have been exploited. The work that you're doing is so valuable, and I really appreciate the time that you have taken to have this conversation and share information with our viewers today. If you are tuning into the show today and you are in a situation of immediate danger, please call 911. If you are looking for information and support as it relates to human trafficking, as mentioned, you can call the Human Trafficking Hotline 24/7 at 1-833-900-1010. Again, that's 1-833-900-1010. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Freedom Fighters Code Gray, and we hope that you'll join the next conversation.